would you like to be introduced as Peanut, or is that just a Facebook thing?
Well, no, actually, that is a riverboat thing.
That's what I was figuring.
Uh, Captain Lawrence Lamprize, the first captain I decked for line boats on March 11th, 1987. I stepped on a towboat. I was 16 years old with a cord emancipation. And Captain Lawrence had got me on boats with what was then McAllister Towing Company on the Phil McAllister with him. And the only way Mr. McAllister would hire me is if I agreed to finish high school. And I'm like, how, pray tell, am I supposed to finish high school? And we're on boats. I know nothing about boats, sir, but I know I got to be gone. And he says, well, I'll tell you what. He says, I heard you have a sister in Louisiana. I said, well, my roots are in Louisiana, partially. And he says, well, if you'll go stay with your sister while you go to school, uh, Weber Marine, Doug Weber, and Bob Wooten down here at Weber Marine are friends of mine, and they agreed to work you during school months. You work for me when you're out of school, whether it's for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And that's what I've done until I finished. I guess you'd say a form of high school. I was taking, night courses for today's internet and night courses at the local trade school. They were close to my sister, and that's how I got my certificate of graduation and got my start on towboats.
And we're going to touch more on that. So have you retired, or are you still tripping?
Well, I'm a trip pilot as of right now. I'll probably take another full-time job here in the next few weeks. But as of right now, I'm having to deal with some personal issues. I've just been a trip pilot, which of course that causes issues in itself. But yeah, it's a way out to good with the
Well, I'll do a quick intro, and then we'll get into the episode. Yeah, I think we've got a fair amount of ground to
band.
cover.
Okay.
Just one second. Welcome back to Between the Levees. I'm joined today by Captain Greg Peanut Whittington, a trip pilot that's been in the industry uh, almost as long as I've been alive here. But well, he's a trip pilot currently, and we're going to get into some other things he's got going on. Well, we'll start with a little project called Born in 71. Tell me about that one.
Well, that's the story of my life. Um, from the time I was born in 71, reflecting back on different things of my life and depression it's caused that wasn't dealt with in a timely manner that eventually slapped me in the face. And I didn't know how to talk about those little things. And I heard somebody playing a banjo and I loved it. So I decided to buy a banjo and start learning to play. Now I'm having to be 100% self taught because of all the online videos or books you can buy consist of people have all their fingers. They do not have the tip of this ring finger or middle finger. I can't use it. So I'm having to work around it. So I made a deal with God back in August. If you'll help me learn how to play this thing, I'll put my life story into tunes and use it to reach out to help the mental health community. So that's what the tune's all about. That's what got me started in music. It's therapy for myself and hopefully help others.
And I do appreciate what you're doing there, sir. Indeed. We'll get into more of that as we go. But I suppose fill me in, walk me through your life from 1971 up until that first time stepping on a towboat at 16 years old. What kind of guided your way?
Well, my mother and father, all of my my blood family are from here in Mississippi. But of course, back in the 70s, there is no work at all around here, industry or any otherwise. And now there's still very little, to be honest, in that area. And of course, my father, being a blue collar industry man, he ventured off and earned a well, ventured off into Louisiana as a welder, pipe fitter, and got a job there helping construct Dow Chemical. Expanded and ended up staying. And so I was born in Baton Rouge. We lived on the bayou just south of the Grove State Bridge, kind of halfway between the Grove State Bridge and Pelican Shipyard down there, down that way. And that's where we lived up until I was, say, I think about 18 months old, but I was 14 months old when my father drowned in a tragic outboard motor accident. So I never knew him. My mom, for whatever reason, sold, eventually, I think they may have been renting the place. So she probably took my father's life insurance money and bought a home uh, further up in, I don't know what community we call it. We just always called it Stassy Road, a Plaquemine area on the other side of the bayou, closer to Plaquemine. And that's where we lived until I was about 6 years old. And she married a man from Bayou Soil, Louisiana. And all due respect, I'd just rather not mention this name too for protection of. Already going to take back a couple things. I'm not saying he was all bad, but he made it clear he wasn't my father. And of course, that presented problems in its own to a 6 year old child. So that song addresses that issue briefly, in which I intend there being a sequel to everything. All I'm doing is taking my thoughts and randomly writing them down, or I might even hit record on my camera and talk to it to have it. I'll go back later, and as I learn to play different chords of music, different things, it might say, hey, you know what I wrote down the other day, it sounds good in this if I make it a lyric. And I'm taking my pieces of thoughts and pieces of music I learned and putting puzzle pieces together where they fit as I learn.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your life growing up, from say 10 years old to till you got on that first towboat. How'd you find your way to that boat?
Well, I would say about 10 years old because a lot of the 6 years I lived in Bayou Soul, I created a blur for myself. It's self-defense mechanism, and I'm having to make myself try to open up and remember some of it. But mostly, I remember uh, everything kind of had to be perfect for the man. Everybody kind of walked on eggshells around him a little bit, as far as we did. As far as me and my mom and the rest of us. Well, two of us, me and my sister. The other one was older. He was already older teenager by then. By then, I don't think he did so much. But me and my sister, she would have been barely been 13 when Mama married him. So me and her, Mama did have two children by him. I have two half siblings. I don't want to exclude them, and they had their own share of issues. But in that I'm probably jumping the gun in your podcast on some of my thoughts. So I'm trying to stop from rabbit holes, to be honest. I'm bad about getting distracted by something shiny.
Well, I got you. That's no problem. Um, Tell me about what happened after Bayou Sorrel? Where did you move? Where were you living when you got onto
By
that first towboat?
from Bayou Saw, I was 12. I went to live with my grandmother here in Mississippi. And by the time I was just over 13, my oldest brother had moved to Mississippi. My grandmother was getting to where she was showing signs of dementia. None of us really directly realized it yet, but every little thing made her nervous. So a 13-year-old in the house with her wasn't good for her. She loved me to pieces, but so I went to live with my oldest brother until I was 16. And at 16, I went back to Louisiana. Now, I was not, when I say I was a very troubled child, I mean a very troubled mind. I was not in trouble with the law. I was not getting myself into that scene, but that was probably by the sheer grace of God and a whole lot of luck. uh, but I went back to Louisiana and was going to school in the Plaquemine area. Uh, and I had become as redneck could come, with a very redneck twang in a very Cajun accent area. And my accent got me hit in the back of the head when I wasn't looking more than anything. And I finally just said, look, something's got to give. I'm not going to keep getting bullied. And I went through this here in this school district, from 6 years old to 12 years old. I'm not going through it now as well. And uh, I met Cap Lawrence Land Prize, believe it or not, through the biker world, through the biker community. And he says, look, son, let me help you out before you do something to get you in trouble. And that's how I ended up on boats there.
Tell me about your first time stepping out there. What was life like on the boats in '87? And what kind of hitch were you working to start out?
To start out, was working, well, like I said, for me, I was just working when I was on line boats when I wasn't at school. And Weber would allow me 8 hours a day. It's a school, but still being at school, that's what Weber would allow me at 16 is just 8 hours a day. But it wouldn't ever let me get any overtime either. I kind of had to stop, after 5 days a week, and which that was fine. That was all part of the agreement. At least I was working and making two paychecks. Things was going well. So on the line boats during the summer, I usually would school out. When the summer months were let out for the local uh, trade school, I would jump on boat. I would jump on a boat and wouldn't get off until just a few days before it started again. And the very first time I stepped on, I looked around and I thought, I hope I live up to it. And I guess that was my first thought is I hope I'm man enough.
Well, this may be jumping ahead, but that's no issue. When we were talking earlier on Facebook Messenger, you mentioned that you regret stepping on a towboat that very first day. I wanted to talk more about that if you're able.
That's a catch 22. Often I do, but at the same time, I didn't fit in anywhere else. That's how I ended up on a boat to start with. I was probably never going to fit in anywhere else. It wasn't going to get me in trouble. Uh, so in that sense of a way, towboats was a good thing for me. So I can't really say I regret stepping on towboats. I regret being gone on line boats so much. If I had to do it all over again and know what I know now, I would have made homestead somewhere close enough for me to be working a harbor and be home every 12 hours, rather than being gone. And of course, I was a workaholic a lot. And ride 6, 8 weeks at a time, come home for a week at the most, and go back out and do it again. So yeah, I regret those days.
What were the biggest challenges in your personal life working 28 and 28, I assume, or whatever it was like that.
28-14, forever and ever, a lot of forever and ever. Watching your kids grow up in pictures, things you should have been home for. It wasn't home for. I'm not even talking about regularly scheduled stuff. Just, you miss little things, but the hardest things is the bad news phone calls that you can't do anything about. And you should have been home when it happened, but you was being a word off.
How many incidents, I suppose, like that were there for you where you were on a boat and kind of helpless to assist at home?
Countless, countless. Heck, some of them I was working in the fleet, but there was countless times that it happened. I guess the first one that burns in my mind, maybe one day I'll forgive myself for, was December the 2nd of 2001, when my first wife, the mother of my oldest daughter, took her own life while I was on the boat.
Were you able to get off and go home uh, to address that at the time?
I didn't know she had done it. I was actually working nights chasing a boat running up and down the river, usually between CGB 132 and Laplace or Dalro or somewhere in that area. I got off in Laplace around 7 o'clock that morning, got home there in Plaquemine at about 8 o'clock that morning, and that's when I that's when I found her. But she had dropped hints the night before, and kind of thought she was bluffing, to be honest. But even if I would have took her dead serious, I couldn't have got off. I was halfway between 164 and 132 with 16 loads in front of me on a little 1350. So I couldn't have, I couldn't have got off and went home to do anything about it. Anyway, I did make some phone calls, but it was 2 o'clock in the morning when she dropped those hints. So I mean, there's really not knowing there's not anything I could have done and get it through to your head is two different. Getting it through to your heart, two different things,
It
especially
is
when there's children involved.
it is certainly a heavy challenge to cope with while you're stuck out there between those levees. Um, Moving forward a little bit, you just mentioned you were behind 16 loads. Were you, when did you get in the wheelhouse?
Or let's see if I remember back to the exact year now. I got my first license on my 20th birthday, uh, which was a second class back then, OUTV, which, there's no longer operate unexpected towing vessel, but that's what it was then. Uh, because the Coast Guard wouldn't count the 2 years that I had in under the age of 18. It'd only give me the 2 years I had in over the age of 18. So I ended up with a second class OUTV and a 200-ton master of towing endorsement with it, and until I put in the time required for my first class OUTV.
Walk me through your experiences from your first time taking a full-time position on deck on up to the wheelhouse when you were finally cut loose.
Well, I can't really tell you the transition time because I was one of them that everybody swears up and down it don't work for, but I was taught to deck and run boats at the same time, to be quite honest with you. When my deck work was done, whether it was, my cleaning duties on the boat itself or the tow. But when that work was done, Captain Lawrence and even the fleet captains to that deck for it, deck for Captain Wayne Williams. He steered me when my deck work was done. Again, I decked for real old schoolers. My work had to be done, and my steering time came in between those times. That was the steering program during those days.
What was one of the most surprising things you saw at the sticks over that time period?
One of the most surprising things, oh Lord, uh, I would have to say, the time I jumped off of what was then the Tomcat for Plimsoll Marine, uh, there at Burnside Terminal's empty fleet, off the handrails in my underwear, just in time to watch the boat run underneath empty rakes. Uh, After the pilot was trying to downstream in high water, and instead one of the throttles hung up full of head. I guess it's possible. I don't know. I wasn't but 17 years old, so but that's probably the thing that surprised me the most.
It's a hell of a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned 16 loads on a 1350 in 2001. Um, that's almost unheard of these days for some of these boats we have running up and down the river now. But
Oh, yeah.
what
Totally
uh,
unheard.
what skills did you master back then, trained by the old guard, as you said, that maybe are kind of tapering out these days?
The main skill I was taught uh, in situations when you're overloaded like that, you are overloaded. I don't care what river stage or 1350, that many loads, you're overloaded. You're having to think way far ahead. But the main thing I was taught that carried over to this side of the levee with me was Wayne Williams taught me in the fleet. He turned and looked at me and said, "Hey, boy," he said, don't do that. Hold it till it hurts. You're about to try to bag out. There ain't no way to bag out. Just keep steering, keep driving. Hold it till it hurts." And I didn't fully understand what he meant by that. But later on, I was in that situation. I was holding it. I was driving. I didn't ask him nothing. He turned and looked at me and said, "Is it hurting yet?" I'll keep it PG. I said, "Oh, yeah, it's hurting. Hell yeah, it's hurting." He says, "Hold it a little bit longer." He says, "So the whole story now, the whole motto is hold it till it hurts, and hold on just a little bit longer." And that carried from towboats to a life lesson for me.
Well, walk me through, I guess, from 2001 to now. I guess what companies do you work for? What riverways do you excuse me, what rivers do you prefer to run? Where do you like to run? How big is the boat you're operating? Are you still uh trying to do fleet work to be home? Are is it a month away still? What do you have going on these days?
It's usually still a month away when I go out. I did do a little bit of fleet work here a couple of weeks ago just to knock the rust off, but it's usually a line boat or, at least 3,200 or above, big enough to live on. And I prefer the Mississippi and Ohio, the lower Mississippi and Ohio, or at least St. Louis and below. It's got too much work north of that, to be honest with you. And I ran just about all of them at some point. I don't care for that 10-ton waterway at all. It's not truly a river, in my opinion. It's just there, more like a creek.
What kind of experiences can you share that have happened out there over the course of 20 years now? um, that would be totally unexpected or unrecognizable by people on this side of the levee.
Uh, well, one of the experiences, I guess, hmm, I'm really not sure how to answer that question, to be honest with you.
Well, walk me through your experiences through different companies, learning new rivers. Any experiences that were shocking or eye-opening for you?
Well, I guess about every new experience was eye-opening for me, either by the sight there or the just different aspects of the waterway. Uh, I have ran to Arkansas a couple of times. And, the places like, say, the Arkansas or the 10-time waterway, the Cumberland, the Tennessee, even Ohio, northern end of Ohio, the smaller rivers, just how fast they start rising and running after a rain starts. Especially when you're getting close to the confluence, where they start. It really truly amazing to me just how fast they'll rise and start running, very swift and in a hurry during heavy rainstorms. Uh, Met a lot of different people, met some very good people out there. That's a plus. So, as you know, it's a lifestyle. It's not just the industry. It's not just well, it's never been a career for me. It's always been a lifestyle.
We started off, and you mentioned, of course, you posted on Facebook recently with your banjo, walking in the woods, discussing depression and the issues that you've been battling, it sounds like, for a long time. How common are those issues out there on the water, and how best do you think you could, I mean, do you out there on these trips? I mean, are you coaching deckhands through some issues? What's the experience out there in that regard?
I don't know if I would call it coaching, but there's been one or two that's opened up to me and expressed. I'm not going to say necessarily battling depression, but being gone, how it saddens them, and so forth. There's been a couple that's talked to me and opened up. I've talked to them without judgment aside, and it's a common problem on the water. Uh, Now, back when everybody said he's just not cut out for it, get rid of him. Nowadays, things have changed a little bit for a positive, but mental health is still not being properly addressed on towboats or anywhere else in this world. So let's, not to be chauvinistic in the least, but let's touch on mental health for men, for us men, towboaters, country boys, working class, blue collar men that are taught we don't break. We basically don't feel we're machines. All we do is provide. We go. We don't have time to think about what depresses people. That's why we don't get depressed. Straight up lie. Man tells you that he's lying to you. I know from experience. One day it's going to slap you in the face. So what happens when we do break? When it does slap us in the face? Because of what's been pounded into our heads all our lives, now we're feeling ashamed and feeling like it's our fault. And we're just being big pansies. And quite often, it ends up with that individual feeling like he's being a burden and taken his own life. I've lost way too many of my brothers for that very reason.
How did you best cope with that in your own experience before you found that banjo?
I wasn't coping. I was masking it. It all slapped me in the face one day. And I had a total meltdown. And those that are going to be watching this, that are closest to me and made those phone calls and was checking on me constantly, know just how true this is. I started slowly learning to, I dove into it too deep. The study person I am, I dove off into music theory immediately, and where my brain was comprehending what was supposed to be done, I couldn't get it to happen here and put the theory into play. And I was driving myself crazy. One day I just decided to throw all the music theory out. My brother he taught himself to play guitar. He came over and kind of helped me out a little bit and playing some things by ear. From there, I just started learning chords and learned how to make sounds with things that sound good together and different things, and just start going from there. And it's a slow process. That was August of 2024, and it's. I feel like it should be further along than what I am, but my wife and kids and a couple of friends think I'm doing good. But we're always our own worst critic. But it's been great therapy for me. Some of the things I'm speaking with you about today, I would have never opened up and talked to you about them before learning to put music in my thoughts together and bring it out that way. So it's been a door for me to reach out, not just for myself, but to reach out for others. I, I want people to know there's nothing to be ashamed of. You're not alone. There is thousands, perhaps even millions of people worldwide that used to be that strong, providing man that are battling the same issues. And we need to come together and talk to each other and lift each other up. And let's dig at this home and be the strong men and providers we once was with each other's help.
And I do appreciate you opening up here this evening and sharing with me what you have. Uh, as an aside, to kind of close this out, my brother is sort of a hobbyist or amateur music producer. I was listening to your song earlier. I'd like to collaborate on that if you're interested. I'm not trying to take over your project, but I think it could get interesting.
Yes, sir. I'd be very interested. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me see what
Yes,
I can
sir. I
do
would.
with that. We'll,
That's an
we'll keep.
honor. You even making that honor. I'm sorry, man.
Don't
It's an
be.
honor you're making that offer because I don't care if my name's ever known. But when somebody hears the name I'm using, I'll call my wife my Gypsy Angel. So I'm calling it the Gypsy Angels. You are not alone, Crusade. When people hear that name, I wanted to remember maybe a song, maybe something me or my wife said, something to give them a little hope to fight another day.
Absolutely, sir. I thank you for your time.
I thank you. Thank you very much. Godspeed.
No problem at all, bud. We'll keep in touch.
Yes, sir.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.